live, is it? Oh boy, let's find out. No. Okay, that didn't work. Let me see. Oh wait,
This
now
is
we're
live.
live, apparently. Hey, okay. Never without problems, I guess. What a great way to start.
Yeah.
Ernest had some camera problems, and now it was like not telling me that we're live, but I think we're good now. So, yeah, okay. I can see it on actual YouTube. All right, great. Well, welcome back, everybody. We're gonna do some more contradictions tonight. Um, it might just be me and Ernest this time. I'm not sure who else might join. We might have Christian again. Leif said he got pulled into work, so maybe not. And then your brother in Christ, I'm not sure whether he's going to join either, but we still got two, so we'll keep on going.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm going to pull the contradictions up, but while I'm looking for that, anything new with you? How'd
um,
you put out a video, didn't you? Just
I
recently.
uploaded a video and I haven't done that in too long. It's been too long. What was supposed to be a little break turned into a long break, and
Mm-hmm.
and I needed a little kick in the pants. And the that event in Ohio was a good little inspiration to kind of get me back into the swing of things.
Yeah, he put out a video. What did the thumbnail say? Atheism for dummies.
Atheism is for dummies.
Atheism is for dummies. Uh, yeah, it was one of David's talks from the conference on naturalism. What was the title of it?
It was is atheism compatible with logic, science, and reality?
Nice.
And it was his first presentation on day 2.
Man, you got all the details.
I've typed it out so many times.
Yeah, yeah, you get used to that with YouTube. Okay, so I have no idea when anybody else is gonna join us, so I think we should just start.
Sure.
Actually, real quick, I had a video come out today about the conference. It was the vlog day 1, and tomorrow is going to be episode 2, and the next day is just going to be episode 3. I decided to put them all back to back because they were back to back when I filmed them, and it doesn't make sense to make people wait a week or even several days between vlog episodes. But tomorrow's is an hour long, so you might have to find some time to watch that one. It is mostly talking with some Black Hebrew Israelites in Cleveland, and there's a good bit of profanity, so yay.
Oh, that's cool
Um,
because I saw parts of it, but so I'm excited to see that one. And I did
eh,
see what you posted today. That was really cool.
Thanks. I'm planning on releasing all of the footage at some point, unedited, with, some audio editing, uncut, I should say. But that is, I think it's 4 hours of footage, so that's a
Mm.
lot. But for transparency's sake, I was thinking about doing that. Oh, I meant to put a poll in the chat. There we go. Sweet. Yeah, but for now, I'm just having that. The shortened version is an hour long, so that has all the best bits from the time that we spent out there in Cleveland. And actually, you don't know all that much about it, Ernest, because
I know.
you were, yeah, you were back at the church. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just, it was really just me, Vocab, James, and Anthony. And then all the guys that we met down there in Cleveland from a church down there. But yeah, I don't think anybody else really has the video, so it should be pretty exclusive, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I just saw parts of it when we were I think I was just looking at it on the camera, or maybe Vocab was working on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what it was. Vocab was working on it
Yeah, he
that
was.
that night. I saw it on the computer screen. So
Yeah,
yeah, the
he
footage looks really good.
he got the footage from me. Well, he had some footage from his camera, I think, but he got like an extra camera angle from me, so I'm not sure what he's going to make of it. But until he does that, you'll just have to come to me to see some Black Hebrew Israelites, I guess. So, yeah. Okie dokie. Yeah, let's get started. So, anybody that's tuning in for the first time that doesn't know, we are doing a series on Bible contradictions. There's a book called The Skeptic's Annotated Bible, which is a translation of the King James Bible with a bunch of commentary from an atheist. So, yeah, a lot of critical commentary and a list of a lot of alleged contradictions. There's a companion website called skepticsannotatedbible.com, and that has 550 something contradictions. And then there's also a list of contradictions from Shabir Ali, who is a prominent Muslim scholar. And so I kind of combined the two of them and went through all of them to answer them over the past few months. These answers don't really originate with me. I pulled them from other places because I'm not a genius. But somebody needed to collate all of these together. So that's what I did. And we're just going through and reviewing them probably for the next year. So episode 4, here we go. All right, number 31. From what were the animals created? Genesis 1:20 says, "And God said, let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the sky." Versus Genesis 2:19, which says, "And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and he brought them to the man to see what he would name each one. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name." So before we go ahead and answer, there's people in the chat. Let me make sure I can see those. Anybody wants to answer it or put something in there, what you think the answer is, go ahead. And if we don't get anything in a few seconds, we'll just answer it. And every time we pull up one and we're reading one, you don't have to wait for us to tell you to try and answer it. We've had some people in the past just throw in answers in the chat, and that's pretty fun for the interaction. So if you got anything, go ahead. But if not, take it away, Ernest. What do you think about this one?
Well, I guess what is the contradiction? Because it says the waters teem with living creatures, and then it says God formed every beast of the field out of the ground.
I should just make a habit of pulling them up on the Skeptics website.
Because if the question is like, are they made? Are the animals made from the waters or made from the ground?
That's the question.
It would be a contradiction, but it's specific as to what type of living creatures are made in the waters and what type of living creatures are made from the ground.
Yes.
So, because I put in my notes, so for Genesis 1, verse 21, it says sea creatures specifically are from the sea, and 124 says land animals from the land. So I'm not sure what the contradiction is here.
Well, let me see if I can share it on their website, because this
I'm
is
not
kind
sure
of
what
one of those.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what they're claiming is the contradiction.
This is one of those things that kind of ends up being a KJV-ism. Because, well, let me just share it. Give me a second. Okay, sweet. That worked. This is from the Skeptic's Annotated Bible website. From what were the animals created? From water or from the ground? And if you look at the King James English, it just seems a little funky to us today. "And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And the idea being the moving creatures are what are brought forth from the waters, which would mean like any moving creature if you take it in a really woodenly literal way. Can I make this bigger? No, I cannot. Oh well. Yeah.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, it seems to be saying it's from the sea, and on the other hand, it seems to be saying it's from the ground. But if you just read the text in an English Bible that has modern English, then it's easy. It makes
Hmm.
sense. The living creatures in the water come from the water, so they're
Right.
fish
Or even if
or
you
whatever
change,
else.
right. I mean, even if you change out, instead of it saying living creatures, okay, the King James said moving creatures.
Mm-hmm.
It's still the creatures in the water. They're both living and moving. But but yeah, once I read into it and I saw verse 21 and then verse 24, it gets more specific as to what creatures are in what regions that are being created.
Yeah. Yeah, we covered this either last week or the week before, talking about Genesis 1 and 2, where it seems to be like they're contradictory, but it's really that, and I can't remember which one does which, but I think it's Genesis 1 gives the more like the summary account, and then Genesis 2 gives you more details.
Hmm.
So they're covering the same thing from two different points of view.
Right,
But
right.
th- this is the kind of thing that makes me go, do we really have to cover this? Because it's like, it's really easy. The
Uh-huh.
things in the water come from the water. The fish, the uh, I can't even think of any other things that live in the water. You know, jellyfish, whatever. And the things on the land are, you know, the beasts of the field, like it says.
Hmm. Right.
I, it's just so painfully obvious.
I mean, it's the very next sentence, isn't it? In Genesis 120, and let me see. Sorry.
No, you're good. Real quick, I put a poll in the chat that says, "Is the Bible full of contradictions?" It looks like it's got uh, some answers for yes, no, and it's complicated. And I think this comment is someone saying that their favorite Bible contradiction is the differing genealogies for Jesus. If you want to put in the chat if I'm right about that, if that's what you're trying to say, we actually covered this one already, I think, as well. So I can share that one real quick since you brought it up, and while Ernest is
Oh,
looking for some stuff.
I found it. Do you
Okay.
want me to? Um,
Yeah, go ahead. You do that first, and then I'll find what I was looking for.
yeah, it was. So the very next sentence says, "So God created the great creatures of the sea." I mean,
Oh.
it seems, I mean, right after saying, "Let the waters teem with living
Uh huh.
creatures." So,
Uh huh.
I mean, and this is like simple. It doesn't get any more basic than this. It's almost like if you're looking for things, you can
Yeah.
find them if you pull everything out of context and aren't willing to read the very next sentence. You know.
Yes. I had said about Matthew and Luke and their genealogies, just to bring this one up real quick. I had said that we had covered this one already, but I got myself mixed up because I'm actually preparing a teaching for my church right now, and that's one of the things we're covering in it. So I was thinking of that. Um, I'm just going to answer this real quick because we're going to go over it in a live stream sometime later down the line. But Matthew and Luke seem to have differing genealogies of Jesus, but it's because they're for differing purposes. So both of them have the same lineage from Abraham to David. And then I think it's Matthew that goes through the line of Solomon, and then it's Luke that goes through the line of Nathan, David's sons, and both of them come back to Jesus. Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the idea is the Solomon's line is since he's the firstborn, he's the line of royalty of the kings coming down from David, and then it ends in Joseph and then Jesus. Now Joseph and Jesus aren't biologically related, but he adopted Jesus, so you kind of have the connection there between Joseph and Jesus, so he's kind of grafted into this line. And then the biological side is actually through Mary, because let me see if I remember. Yeah, so you go through Nathan from David all the way down to Mary, and then she's got the biological relation to Jesus, but it says, I can't remember in which one. It says Jesus was regarded as the son of Joseph, but he's the son of Mary, son of her father, so on and so forth, back to David. You could look at Matthew, the line of Joseph, being kind of like an ID card for Joseph, saying, hey, this is my lineage all the way back to David. This is how I can prove that I'm part of the line of kings. And then in Luke, you get the biological relation between David and Jesus. So actually got that one brought up between me and some Muslims when I was talking to them over Skype. And I had just figured out that one, like actually just researched it. So I was able to bring it up on the spot with them, and that was pretty cool. But we shall continue to the next one. How did Antiochus die? You want to go ahead and read this one? I need a drink of water.
Mary's comment is funny.
Oh, yeah.
That under the water is ground. If they're trying to connect, kind of circle the square in their mind, that underneath the water, there's ground.
True.
But yeah, so the Maccabees, I was lost on this one. I do not have Maccabees in my Bible, so
yeah, I wanted to see what you were going to say about it.
I looked and I just got to the point where I was like, I got to move on to the next one because I wasn't coming up with anything, and it wasn't something I was familiar with. So to be honest, I was a little lost on.
I can give a little bit of background to the contradiction, but I didn't really put much research into it either because, and it's for the same reason you said, we don't really consider this part of Scripture. There's a whole conversation going on there, but I can summarize it. So you have essentially the same New Testament for Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox, but each of them has different Old Testaments. And Protestants take the Old Testament only that is attested by the Jews. And you have other books that were not attested by the Jews, but were kind of included with Scripture as the Apocrypha later on. Some of those are considered canon by the Catholics, and some of them are considered canon by the Orthodox. But Protestants don't see those as Scripture because they're not attested by the Jews, which were the people who had the oracles of God. So that kind of disqualifies this one. Now, the reason it's on the list is because in the original King James did actually include the Apocrypha. They were between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they were, well, Apocrypha means hidden away. And you can kind of interpret that as meaning like set aside. So you have the Old Testament, which is inspired by God. You have the New Testament, which comes from the Old Testament, or stands on the shoulders of the Old Testament and is inspired by God. And then you have the Apocrypha, which were written in the intertestamental period between those two testaments, but are not considered Scripture. And this just comes from that time period. So a little bit of history lesson. Antiochus was a king of the Seleucid Empire. He was Antiochus IV. He was called Antiochus Epiphanes, and he was a terrible king. He persecuted the Jews a lot. And this book, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Maccabees, are called as such because they're kind of a history of the Maccabean revolt, which was the Jewish revolt led by Judas Maccabeus, which kind of rebuffed Antiochus. So there seems to be a contradiction in here. I can read it, and then maybe just off the top of our heads, we'll try and figure it out, but I'm not going to put too much stock into this one. So 1 Maccabees 6 says, he took his bed and became sick from disappointment because things had not turned out for him as he had planned. Thus King Antiochus died there in the 149th year. Oh, hey, look, Christian's joining us. What's up, buddy?
Can you guys hear me?
We
Hmm?
can hear
I
you.
can't hear you.
You can't hear us?
Let me see what's happening.
I hope that's just on your end and not on our end. I'm going to keep reading while you figure that out. First Maccabees 1 says, when the priests of Nanea had placed the treasures on display, Antiochus with a few attendants arrived at the temple precincts. As soon as he entered the temple, the priest locked him inside.
Y'all just keep going. I don't know what's happening.
Okay, well, we can hear you still. After opening a secret trap door in the ceiling, they hurled stones at the leader and his companions and struck them down. Then they dismembered their bodies and cut off their heads, throwing them to the people outside. So on the one hand, it seems Antiochus died. Actually, let me bring this up on the Skeptics website, because it also doesn't look like it really contradicts just on the face of it. Antiochus. Oh, is it not on the website anymore? I don't even see it on the website anymore, so I must have taken it out. Yeah, I'm not sure. But it doesn't really look like it contradicts. But I guess we'll keep moving on. In the analysis that I did, there's a few that I said don't really apply, and this would be one of them, just because this is something that we consider a problem for Catholics, but not for Protestants. So, what were the names of the apostles? Number 33. You want to read this one?
Matthew?
Yeah, both of them.
Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. The first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, and James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother Philip, and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. And the next one, and he appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, and James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James. To them he gave the name
Boanerges? Something
I
like
don't
that.
know.
Yeah.
Which means sons of thunder. And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. You know, when I was looking at this page, it's kind of funny. I was like, it'd be helpful is if I wrote down all the names and then I could do like side by side comparison, and then I turned the page, and you had already done that. So
yeah.
I got like halfway through, and then I realized, oh, he already did it on the next page. That's super helpful.
Yeah, so I only included 2 on this slide because that's all I could fit. But the actual contradiction on the website includes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts, which all lists the disciples, and they seem to contradict each other. So I'm just going to bring up there we go. So this is the notes that I have on all this stuff, and I listed them out.
So it basically comes down to who is Thaddeus and who is Judas.
Yeah, pretty much. So you got Thaddeus,
as
Judas.
It turns out, they're the same person.
Yeah. Judas isn't included in Acts because he died before Acts, obviously. Peter in Acts is Simon, Peter, and the others, but we know that's obvious. James and John don't have their titles present in Luke or Acts, so they're just called James and John, not James, son of Zebedee, and John, brother of James. Yes, these are legitimate objections brought up on the website. Thaddeus was also likely known as Judas, son of James. This is the only one disputed by scholars, but it was not likely a mistake given both the possibility of multiple names being given to one person and the detail-oriented accuracy of Luke. Oh yeah, and the King James has Lebbaeus as an alternate name for Thaddeus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Peter has nothing to do with the name Simon, but they're both the names given to the same people, and we know that because it's written out in Scripture. But it's entirely possible that Thaddeus could also be called Judas, son of James. That's not really a problem.
Yeah, from what I saw, Judas was most likely his birth name, and Thaddeus and Lebbaeus was possibly nicknames.
That could make sense because if you take Simon or Simeon, That's the Jewish name, the Hebrew name for Peter, but Peter is a Greek name. Then if you take Judas / Thaddeus, Judas is a Jewish name and Thaddeus is a Greek name. So if you're following the same pattern there,
Well, don't you
Thaddeus
think
could
someone
be.
would have a nickname if their name is Judas? Like after
Yeah,
the events of like
Oh
or
yeah,
e- or even before, just to differentiate the two.
right, yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
great idea that I never thought about.
and
Yeah, that's what I
Judas.
thought of. You're talking about I'm just getting in the middle of this, but I'm guessing you're talking about the different disciple list names in Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Yes, and Acts, and right here, Thaddeus seems to be also Judas.
Yeah, if I was his follower, my name was Judas, I'd get a new one too. I mean,
And I'm pretty sure they keep the same order with the names for all the
it's
names.
also a hint that there's another Judas because they call the other Judas Judas Iscariot, and why would they do
Uh-huh.
that unless there's another Judas?
Mhm.
Right. That's a good idea.
Well,
But I
same
think they
thing.
I
Same
think they
thing with
keep the
Simon.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. They keep the
Simon.
same order, and in that order, Thaddeus is replaced with Judas, son of James. So, yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I found some things that were interesting about that too. Like, what? So Judas would have been a popular name because it comes from the term Judah, which I can imagine would be a popular name in Israel. So uh, the other thing was that let's see. So a historian, Jerome, in the late 300s called him Trinonius, meaning man with three names.
Hmm.
So
Oh.
so even
Hmm.
you know even that long ago, it was known that he was referred to by three different names.
In what century?
Late 300s.
Dang. So what would they have been? Thaddeus, Judas, and Lebbaeus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Bartholomew was also called Nathaniel. Apparently, there's a book called Errors in the King James, which is another response to claims of contradictions. And actually, Hudson, thank you for this comment because you just reminded me of something awesome. I'm gonna pull up the next. Actually, no, I'm gonna wait. I have this book that a friend of mine gave me, which is from like 1850 something, and it did what we're doing right now. It's answering alleged contradictions in the Bible. So just give me 1 second.
Welcome, by the way, Christian.
Oh yeah, it's good to be here.
And
The kids are crazy today. The baby's constantly screaming, and the 4-year-old is really needy. But cool story. We went outside and we found mushrooms, and there was a really flat one, and I pulled it off and threw it, and it went like a frisbee. I didn't know you could do that with a mushroom, but
Oh, nice.
huge hit with a 4-year-old. It was like, we're in now. That was
We'll
something
have to
to
keep
do.
that in mind. They're growing over here too, but yeah, my baby's not old enough for that. Okay. This
Oh,
is
that is a
called,
cool old looking book. I bet that smells good.
it does. Alleged discrepancies in the Bible. I'm probably gonna have it rebound at some point because it fell on the floor and got ripped. Um, it doesn't cover like all of the stuff that we've covered, but like, look at this. I'm trying to be careful with it. Look at this. This old text
I have some
where
old
it's
books like
like,
that I got from when my granddad passed away. I love them. Just like
look,
100-year-old books.
it like puts allegations right next to each other. Here's one text that says one thing and another that says another. I don't know if that's focusing, but this kind of stuff, I just wanted to show this because this kind of stuff has been debunked like 150 years ago. It's nothing new. It's nothing new under the sun. Copyright 1875, I think. Yeah, about 150 years ago, almost.
yeah, it
Pretty
reminds me
nuts.
there in the comments section. I was going through on that video of David Wood's session. An atheist was just like, you theists need to come up with new arguments. And it's like, well, if something was debunked 150 years ago, why would we have to have a new version of the same argument if it was successful back then, why would we have to reinvent the argument,
Because they don't want to deal with the old answers.
Mm. It seems like,
Also,
how about come up with a new response to the refutation?
Yes. My
I think
dog
as
just walked
someone
into the room,
who's
so.
straddled both Christianity and atheism, something both sides need to do more is learn about abductive reasoning, where what you do is you figure out a theory that explains the data in the best way. Well, we don't need to get all into epistemology today. We're trying to do Bible contradictions, but that's probably not something new, but it's something that really changed my lens whenever I learned about it.
You want to explain, like, just give the...
Oh, yeah. So, like, for example, I was teaching a class one time with a student, and it was a virtual class, kind of like we're doing now. And we were doing it with Google Docs, and I could see that they were in the review. This is just an example to show how abductive reasoning works. And so I could see they were in the review, and I was like, "Oh, excuse me, looks like you still have the review open." And then they go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that," and they closed out of it. So at that point, abductively, I have to make an inference to the best explanation. Was the student cheating, or were they telling the truth? And at that point, the data could go either way, because to that point, they seem to be a really, really honest person, not a person who would cheat or anything like that. But then I started looking at the answers on the test, and they were word for word the same as the review. And so at that point, the probability shifted vastly in favor of cheating from being more neutral. But I still wasn't absolutely certain. You're never absolutely certain with abductive logic. It's an inference to the best explanation. But I could be pretty certain they were cheating. And so I started cross-examining them about this. And they were just like, "Oh, it's because I memorized the answers," right? Which isn't as likely of an explanation as just simply saying they were cheating. Okay. But then I looked into like the edit history and saw where the answers were being pasted in. And so that really shifted it. And so then,
hey,
and
but
then
you can't be certain.
Yeah, and then they eventually confessed that they cheated. But even at that point, there could have been a super ad hoc, complex explanation of there was someone off screen with a gun telling them to act like they had cheated, with ready copy and pasted in. I want you to type up the answers and then copy and paste them into the thing without looking at the review, but having the review open. So there'd be some way to explain the data without it just being that they cheated. But the simplest explanation is just that they cheated. Right. And so I can't be, 100% certain that they cheated, but I can be 99.9999999% certain that they cheated. And so everything that we're studying, like with history or the resurrection, any of these sorts of claims of things that happened in the past, we're using abductive reasoning. Arguments for God are all abductive reasoning. You argue for God that he's the best. You conclude God because it's an inference to the best explanation for the data set that we have.
I need to learn more about that because I find it so frustrating when people say, "But you can't know."
Right. So that's the issue that a lot of times when you're arguing with someone, like I'll be arguing with someone about the existence of God, and they're like, "Well, we know that God doesn't exist because only measurable and repeatable things can be said to exist." It's like, okay, well, we need to backtrack and stop arguing about whether God exists and instead figure out whether logical positivism, which is what only measurable and repeatable things is true, we need to figure out if that's true. Then we can go on to figure out, and you have to go back and kind of go deeper and deeper into your metaphysics to figure out where it is that you actually disagree that's leading you to disagree up here on God or the resurrection or miracles or whatever it is. You have to go deeper and deeper and figure out, okay, where do we actually separate from each other?
I don't know if anybody just saw it, but I just tried to drink this water like this. I was paying attention. Sorry.
That's a good listener. So the inference to the best explanation there is that you're a really, really good listener and you were just really into what I was saying. And so you drank the bottle like a buffoon.
Thank you. I want to bring up this comment. Hans Zarkov. I think, is that Anton LaVey in the thumbnail or the avatar there? Funny how one can find 600 errors in a book that's supposed to be perfect and demands you obey it under penalty of eternal punishment. I just want to say a couple of things in response to this. So these are allegations of errors from a skeptic that we're going through. We're not saying, hey, look, we found 600 errors. We know they're errors, and we're just going to try and gaslight you and say they're not. We're examining them to say, are these actually errors or are they not? And so far, they're not. On the other hand, the second part of your objection, it's not demanding that you obey the Bible under penalty of eternal punishment. The reason people go to hell is because they sin, not because they couldn't follow a book. And on that note, there's no reason to say that people in hell wouldn't keep sinning. So it's not like you're punished eternally for finite sins. And lastly, the only thing that saves people from heaven, it's not doing enough. It's not doing good. It's not following all the law. It's trusting in Jesus. That's what saves people. So,
Yeah, and for the sake of argument too, Hans, or I guess Dr. Zarkov, I was raised a Christian. I became an atheist and later became a Christian again. And if I was just going into this conversation with you one-on-one, I would just grant that there's errors in the Bible. And then we go, okay, where do we go from there? Where are the arguments that God exists? How does materialism make any sense at all? And on and on. But that's just the topic of this particular video today isn't how can we convert Hans Zarkov. It's
right.
Looking at these Bible contradictions and saying, is there a very, very, very plausible solution to these so that it's not actually a contradiction? So far, it looks like, the ones I've seen, there's not. So,
yes. And one final comment on that before we keep moving. There's going to be disagreement in the scholarship on whether people think the Bible actually does have error. You'll have more, I guess you could say conservative scholarship, but I don't like using that term, which says, no, there's absolutely none.
I think the term's more based scholarship.
Yeah, there you go. Then you have more liberal scholarship, which says, yeah, there can be, or maybe there are here, and here. But the overall message is still reliable. So they might say stuff like that. But either way, whether you have a Bible that has some errors or it's completely perfect, we can still have high confidence that Jesus actually rose from the dead, and then it's game over at that point. Christianity is true. If Jesus rose from the dead, Christianity is true. So, yeah.
Well, and what are the what are the errors? To me, that makes a big difference too. Like, let's assume that there are at least more than one error or more than zero. If there's more than zero errors, how important is that error? Is it that Jesus didn't die on the cross, or Jesus didn't rise from the dead? Like, to me, that would be a major error. But if was this king this old when he died, or was he this old when he died? It's like, really, who cares? It has nothing to do. It doesn't refute the gospel in any way. So,
right. And it's not like, even if there is an error, even if you grant that there's an error here, and here, it's not like you pull on this thread and the whole sweater comes apart, right? So,
right.
Hello. Hello. You want to come answer some Bible contradictions?
You want to come say hi to everybody?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. That's cute.
All right, head back upstairs, sweetie.
Oh, and what you're
jihadis
saying
would never.
Go ahead, sorry.
Jihadis would never kiss their kids.
Go put your hijab back on. And if you want to say anything else, you're going to need a whiteboard, okay? Okay.
The other thing you were saying, Christian.
Well, hold on. She's trying to get my attention.
Go ahead. Or were you talking to him?
Yeah, well, it was to the point that he was making about what was it, deductive reasoning?
Abductive reasoning.
Abductive.
Mm-hmm. See, I was listening.
Yeah. And I was doing my best. So, it kind of, to me, it comes down to, because they're like, well, show me the evidence. And it's like, to what level is required? Like, what level of evidence would be convincing if you've made up your mind that no amount of evidence would be convincing,
Yeah.
Like
and
Right, exactly. And to what even if I presented every piece of evidence that someone was looking for, there still needs to be a reasonable, it's like, is your doubt reasonable? Like beyond a reasonable doubt. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
is it reasonable to still have doubts once the evidence that's requested is presented? Um, just like the story about the student that was cheating. At some point, is like, he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's like at some point it's
Yes.
unreasonable to think that this person didn't cheat.
Yeah,
So
you don't have to prove him guilty beyond all doubt. So I'm also an attorney, and so I understand like preponderance of the evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt, and you use abductive logic in law all the time. Like a jury, they're never going to be 100% certain that this person negligently hurt my client or whatever it is, but they can be pretty certain of it, right? And we use this all the time in our daily lives. Like, do you think your wife loves you? I mean, yeah, most likely, yeah, she does. I can say that certainly, but not like 100%. But I could do it with tons and tons of abductive lot or a bunch of evidence that comes in and leans in that direction. But I can't prove it in the same way I prove 1 + 1 is 2, or if P then Q, P therefore Q.
That's good. That's good. Okie dokie. Let's keep moving. Let's do some more abductive reasoning. Oh, I didn't even realize I made I made the other slide for this. Okay. These are the other references to the names of the apostles. There you go. Luke 6 and Acts 1. Oh, and the chart. I forgot I put it in here. There's the chart. But we already went over that. Okay.
Well, no one can accuse you of being too dependent on your PowerPoint.
Yeah, I guess. I did bring it up just somewhere else, but whatever.
And that was a good looking chart too. It's a shame. It's a shame we were focusing on
in
the
fact,
other
go
one.
back. Let's get one more look at it. let's give Julian a round of applause.
Yes.
That's a good chart
Thanks,
right there.
thanks. Yeah. All right. Number 34. Where did Jesus first appear to the 11 disciples after the resurrection? Who wants to read this one?
I can. Matthew 28:16. Meanwhile, the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain Jesus had designated. Verses Mark 16:14. Later, as they were eating, Jesus appeared to the 11 and rebuked them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. Luke 24:33-37. And they got up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem and found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them. John 20:19. It was the first day of the week, and that very evening, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them. Peace be with you, he said to them. I think that'd be shalom. So imagine you're just sitting in a room eating your nachos. Jesus shows up. Shalom. Yeah.
Okay, so the first one seems to be saying that Jesus appeared to them in Galilee, and the second ones, or the latter three, are saying that he appeared to them in Jerusalem. And this is a question of where did he first appear to the disciples. So, yeah. Take it away, whoever wants to take it.
I'm going to go grab a book that might be relevant for this one, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'll mute myself.
Yeah, this would be considered one of the, you could call it one of the resurrection contradictions or one of the gospel contradictions, because there's it's kind of in its own category, gospel contradictions, because that's the most important story in the Bible. If that's true, then Christianity's true, so people attack it the most. And there's a lot of scholarship on this. I know Mike Lacona just came out with a book. I don't remember the name of it, but it had to do specifically with gospels, or contradictions in the gospel narratives. This would be one of them. So, yeah. I've got some stuff, unless you already have prepared notes.
No,
I'm kind of stalling for Christian because he said he wanted to get a book.
Yeah, I was kind of struggling trying to figure out the timeline.
It can be a little confusing.
So yeah, if you want to go ahead, because I
Sure.
I got nothing.
See? You see? There's contradictions. He is stumped. Ooh.
Well, it's tough because there's not like
Alhamdulillah.
there's not like a side by side where you can compare. They're saying this happened, and this happened. It just seems like
Right.
they're all giving like different accounts of similar events.
You missed it, Christian. He said, I got nothing. And I went, you see?
I was like thinking of some way I could imagine like the novel guys going, you see, he has no answer. He's driving away.
Oh,
you hear me peel out.
I'm okay with saying I don't know.
So I was going to say my answer, but you said you had a book that you wanted to bring up. So
yeah, so I was first introduced to this book on IP's channel.
Yes.
And I haven't read it yet, so I can't vouch for it, but I trust IP and his taste.
But I'm so glad that you brought that up because I literally just mentioned that book, but I couldn't remember the name of it. So there you go.
Oh, yeah. Michael Licona, Jesus Contradicted. No, but so this is pretty standard for a Greco-Roman historiography, which is the genre of the gospel. These aren't just video recordings of things that happened in the past. It's an actual historical genre, and it has all sorts of different tools that it uses when telling a story. So, example, I think I was talking about this with you, Julian. There's this will seem unrelated, but I'll tie it in really in a minute.
Okay.
Nabil Qureshi was a Muslim who was converted to Christianity by David Wood, and he wrote a story called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And in that particular story, a lot of his conversations he'll have a footnote in. If you go and look at the footnote, he says, actually, this was several conversations that I compressed down into a single situation just for brevity and for the sake of making things simple. Right. And I do this same thing. Like if people ask me, how did I meet my wife? I'll compress conversations into a single event. I might change up the chronology of something just to make it more simple. And first century Greco-Roman historiographers could do this sort of thing and not feel bad at all. So if you see like in Mark where Jesus curses the fig tree and then goes to Jerusalem and then he comes back with his disciples and they find it withered. But in Matthew, he curses it and right then it withers. That's a tool that Greco-Roman historiographers used called compression.
You gave it away.
Huh?
That's actually another one that I will cover later on some week down in the future. So
yeah. And so this was something that they did just to save time. And it's not just the Gospels. It's not ad hoc. It's not like, oh, this was a problem, so let's make up a solution. You can actually see the same tools being used in other Greco-Roman historiographies like Suetonius and Plutarch. And I don't remember all of them, and I haven't read this book yet, but just reading I've read a lot of Craig Keener. He's like one of my favorite. Any Christians who are like, I want some good scholars who are very, very well educated on first century culture and they know the relevant languages. I like Craig Keener a lot. I like Craig Evans. I like Mike Heiser, N.T. Wright. But I really, really like Craig Keener a lot. And I've read a bunch of his John commentary, his Matthew commentary, and his Acts commentary. And his Acts commentary has a huge section on Greco-Roman historiography and the sort of methods that they would do and how they would interview eyewitnesses and stuff, which Luke mentions in his intro. They're called, I'm trying to remember the autotoptai and heroptai. I think those are the Greek names. But when he's talking about eyewitnesses and like people who'd written this stuff down. And another good book for this is called Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes. And it talks about how even in modern like Middle Eastern cultures, when they're telling a story, they're not going to be as worried about chronology as we are in our tellings of stories. And so they'll organize things by topic or just whatever they remembered first. And so they're not as worried about getting a, sequential, diachronatic. I don't know if that's a word. Dia is through and then chronos is time. Diachronic. I don't know what the English word is, but
diachromatic? No.
That sounds musical, like a chromatic scale. So those are all good books for that. But
real quick, because you mentioned that book from Mike Licona, if anybody didn't know, I am a chapter director for Ratio Christi. It's an apologetics ministry. It works on college campuses. They just started a series of webinars, and the inaugural one was Jesus Contradicted. So Mike Licona essentially gives an overview of this book. That's open to the public. It's free. I'm posting the link in the chat. So if anybody wants to go watch that or any of the other ones that we've done so far, I'm actually on the team that is running these webinars, so you might see me on there every once in a while. But yeah, that's relevant, so I just want to bring that up.
And one more thing I was going to say about this is if we started judging these ancient Greco-Roman historiographies with modern historiographic lenses or just anything that's totally alien to the text, it's not fair because a genre like that didn't exist. And so if you're sitting there saying, what doesn't conform to this genre? Well, the genre didn't exist.
Right.
And this is the analogy, something similar to this is in Islam and in Islamic studies. A lot of times the Islamic scholars will throw out the biographical material of Muhammad that's 100 years earlier than the Hadith because it doesn't have these chains of transmission. But they only made up these rules that you need to have a chain of transmission 100 years after all the Maghazi literature was written. And so it's just not fair to put that kind of a standard on Sirat Rasulullah when a standard like that didn't exist at the time it was written.
We should do our own live stream on Sirat Rasulullah. That'd be fun.
That would be fun.
This man did his, was it your doctoral thesis or your
No, just a master's thesis, but it did go really long.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, now that we're way far afield, let's bring it back.
Yeah.
Where did Jesus first appear to the 11 disciples after the resurrection? Did you give your answer to this one? You were saying it was the compression, right?
Or they're just not as worried about this sort of thing as we would be, you know?
Yeah.
Like I would just say, oh yeah, it's a contradiction, but it doesn't matter because these are written in a genre that's not worried about this sort of thing contradicting. But I mean, there's probably a way to work around it too if you look at it. I mean, if it's really important to you, I'm sure there's an answer out there. But I haven't done a deep dive on this. I can't say deep dive without laughing.
Yeah. On this one, what I wrote was the Greek in Matthew 28:16 doesn't include words like meanwhile or then. English translations include meanwhile, but it just says the 11 disciples went to Galilee and to the mountain that Jesus had designated. It is detached from a chronological linear timeline. So it's kind of like an isolated event, I guess you could say. It's just not really, like you said, they don't really care about putting it in a linear form like we do nowadays. It has no bearing on when they saw Jesus. It just says that at some point they went to the mountain in Galilee. So you can't say that this is saying this is the first account.
Yeah, you're right. I don't see any kind of a time indicator. Hoide indica matheta eporute saneis tes galilaianeis toros taxato.
God bless you.
Yeah, autois Jesus.
Yeah, Luke and John make the account of Jesus' first appearance to them in a room in Jerusalem, and the Mark account is about another appearance 8 days later, also, by the way. And we can get into the whole conversation about the long or short ending of Mark, but whatever. Okay. Number 35. How many of Era's offspring returned from Babylon? This one should be really quick because we've already covered this twice, technically. On every one like this, I gotta explain this. I'm gonna have to explain this every time. But there's a poster from the Reason Project, which was sponsored by Sam Harris and his wife, whose name I can't remember right now. It was a list of a whole bunch of contradictions. It was actually compiled by Steve Wells, which is the same guy that wrote the book that we're referring to this whole time, the Skeptic's Annotated Bible. And this one contradiction between Ezra and Nehemiah was broken up into, I want to say, 16 different contradictions. So and they're thrown throughout the poster. And I pretty much took it numerically the way that the poster did. So we're going to see this thrown throughout these live streams. But the whole idea is Ezra lists out the people who came back from Babylon after the exile to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah says 100 years later, hey, I found this paper of these people who returned from Babylon. Here's what the numbers said. And the numbers don't match up. And the answers that we had for it last time was it's possible that people got added to or removed from the rolls as people were going along, because Ezra talks about the people who left from Babylon, but it's not clear that he's saying these are the people that then arrived in Jerusalem. There can be people that settled somewhere along the way or people that got added in along the way. There were a couple other answers, but that's the one that seems most convincing to me. So this one is probably going to be really quick every time we go through it. It just doesn't have to be a direct contradiction because there's possible answers to it. And if you guys don't have anything you want to say, we can keep moving, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I would agree with you. They're different time periods. But just to, I hate to be that guy, but just to go back on that last one, for me, because I feel like I just kind of punted, but I really can't see, since it's not specific, like the first time Jesus saw the 11 was here in this verse, and then it's the next one says the first time was here, and so on. I'm not seeing where they're even making the claim. So like in Matthew 28,
right,
it says, meanwhile, the 11 disciples went to Galilee, but it doesn't say that they saw him. It doesn't even mention seeing him. They were just going. They were going somewhere. So in that one, it doesn't say that they saw him for the first time. They were just going somewhere. It doesn't even mention them seeing him in that verse. And then so to me, for it to be a contradiction, I would have to see this verse says that they saw him for the first time here, and then this verse it said they saw him for the first time here, and so on. And then I could go, oh well, this place isn't the same as this place, and so on. So I guess I'm not seeing. I would have to see the contradiction before I could even respond to it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it's another one of those where it doesn't really seem apparent just because they really have to stretch to make it a contradiction, I think. They're not really saying this is the first time that we saw Jesus in all of these paragraphs. Yeah.
Yeah, it just looks like four different people providing different bits of information, but I don't see I'm not seeing where the bits of information contradict the other. They're just different, but different doesn't necessarily mean like
contradictory.
That they can't all be true.
I know it seems like I'm just picking every single opportunity to remind everyone that I'm a lawyer, but this reminds me like, so in law, whenever you're hearing like the testimonies of different witnesses, just because there's a contradiction doesn't mean that one of them's lying. Or even if there's just way too much being the exact same thing, you might get suspicious. So I'm thinking of a case right now where 3 witnesses saw a car wreck, 2 saw a red car hit the vehicle, and 1 person remembered it as a purple car. Now, who's right and who's wrong? I would say probably the 2 that saw the red car are correct just because of multiple attestation. But there was never any belief that the person who thought the car was purple was lying. Right? Like people just see different things and they report different things. Like we all have this first person experience of reality and we're experiencing it differently. And so, I'm just like kind of more loosey-goosey with stuff, I guess. But
let's see.
No, I think in this discussion, it's good to have a lawyer's take on.
I just keep wanting to go. Well, is there good evidence he rose from the dead? Yeah. Okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm tempted to do it that way too.
Well, that's lazy. And this is good. We can examine scripture closer.
And there's a lot of people that don't like addressing this kind of stuff because it's low-hanging fruit and it's tedious and whatever, but I want to address it because somebody out there is struggling with it, and I want to have a resource.
Well, and even, the conversation will go, oh, people know about this, and they're thinking about it and talking about it. It's not some big secret.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I'm curious, with the law background, and then you had kind of dipped into atheism. At what point was the transformation? Was it after you became a lawyer? You became more convinced of the evidence of Christianity, or was it the other way around?
All right, so I first became, it kind of pushed me both ways. So I first became an atheist when I was 25 in law school. And it's because I guess like in law, they train you how to think very analytically, like taking an issue and then looking at evidence specifically for that issue. And it's just like getting a new brain in a way. And then, I mean, it's like a whole 4-hour discussion to get into, but briefly, I guess a couple things maybe bounce back out of it. One was seeing how wholeheartedly atheists grabbed onto Christ mythicism. And I was like, oh, wow, they can be just as close-minded as a Christian. And then another thing was I didn't see how any sort of meaning and purpose could coincide with materialism. I could never reconcile materialism with life having meaning or humanism or morals or even just having a duty, people having a duty to believe whatever's true. It's like if materialism is true and all that exists is statements, then why do we even bother finding what's true? And so it was almost like for me to say, well, I'm going to try and figure out what's true. In order to even start asking that question, I have to reject materialism. And then once I rejected materialism, it was like, okay, anything's possible. Like anything's possible, but I won't believe everything. I'm going to be very, very skeptical. And so,
but the door's wide
from
open.
there, it was like, yeah, it's no longer, oh, it's not measurable and repeatable, therefore I can't believe in it. It's like, well, that's a very dumb standard. Even that standard itself isn't measurable or repeatable. It's just some statement.
Right.
So from there, I was able to, and then thinking abductively, I started, looking at like cosmology and fine tuning and arguments for the resurrection. And like at each point, it was like Christianity. And it's not like a perfect model that explains everything and there's no longer any questions, but it's like the best model out there.
So in a way, becoming a lawyer actually helped. Did we lose him?
Maybe. I'll answer yes. in the long run, yes, it did. Well, hopefully he'll join back in a minute. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving.
It looks like he fell asleep.
Yeah, it kind of does. Hey, we're not that boring.
He's like, these contradictions aren't contradictions.
Yeah, they're contradicting my sleep schedule.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, number 36. Here we go. What was in the Ark of the Covenant? Now, before we start, actually, this one was kind of a thinker. So this one, I wrote that this one is kind of above my pay grade to answer. So I have an answer. It's just from another source. Oh, yeah, it looks like maybe his internet was messing up or something. So hopefully we'll see Christian in a minute. 1 Kings 8 says, there was nothing in the ark except the two stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord had made a covenant with the Israelites after they had come out of the land of Egypt. And then Hebrews 9:4 says, speaking of the Holy of Holies, containing the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. Inside the ark were the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. So the first one just says the two stone tablets were in there, and the other one says it was the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff, and the stone tablets. So, and actually the first verse says there was nothing in the ark except the two stone tablets, so it's an exclusive claim. So what's going on here?
And you've got the Second Chronicles one too.
The Second Chronicles one, yes, it's just not on the slide. It says there was nothing in the ark except the two tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord had made a covenant with the Israelites after they had come out of Egypt. So it's pretty much the same as 1 Kings.
Right. Yeah, so I looked up when, like, what was the date that event, that what the event that those two verses are describing, First Kings and Second Chronicles. So I was curious, well, what time period are we talking about? From what I saw, it looked like it was around 1000 BC.
Okay.
And then I was curious, okay, well, when did they lose the Ark of the Covenant? And it looked like that was around 600 BC. So then I was curious, okay, well, then Hebrews would have been written in the first century before 70 AD. Is it possible in the 400 years from when it was brought into the temple and lost, is it possible that they may have added additional items?
Between what time?
1000 BC and 600 BC, which was when it was lost. So we've got a 400-year period after First Kings and Second Chronicles.
Yeah.
And then you've got it's 1,000 years later that it's being described in Hebrews.
Right.
So I'm just curious, like, well, is it necessarily a contradiction, or are they all correct?
Yeah, and it could be just two different time periods where there's been a change that's not recorded.
Right, was something passed down that wasn't recorded that the author of Hebrews was describing as additional items that were included into the ark?
That's possible. That's not what I came across. I think that could possibly work.
Because First Kings, when it said there's nothing in there except these, the stone tablets, and Second Chronicles says the same thing. Well, that could be the case. And then later, the author of Hebrews was describing that they included additional items later. So I guess you've got a timeline issue, just like we've seen before, where over time things can change.
By the way, Christian said his internet went out. Curse the gin.
Oh no.
I think that's a possible answer. That's not something I had considered before, but I think there's an answer I came across that was pretty convincing to me, and I want to see what you think about it. And it's kind of in depth, so it might take a minute. But let me share my screen again. Okay. Can I make this any bigger? No, I can't make it any bigger. Why can't I make it any bigger? Whatever. Okay, so yeah, I wrote up here, the answer to this kind of goes above my pay grade. So Ben Van Noort has a website called Contradicting Bible Contradictions, and this is what I got from him. The tables, oh geez, typo, my bad. The tablets of Moses were in the ark. However, the golden pot filled with manna and Aaron's budded rod were not in the ark, but in the Holy of Holies. The description has the rhetorical form of an anakoluthon. Man, I wish Christian was here because he could probably tell me what that is. A free enumeration in a loose narrative style. The main goal of this passage is to have a description of the tabernacle. And here's some verses to compare. This is in Hebrews, I believe. A tabernacle which is called the Holy of Holies, having a golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden jar holding the manna and Aaron's rod, which budded, and the tables. No, he did write tables. And the tables of the covenant. And above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. That's the New American Standard Bible. The altar of incense before the Holy of Holies was part of it, just as the great altar in front of the tabernacle was part of that. Yeah, so here's an interesting thing. In this verse, it says in Hebrews, the Holy of Holies containing the golden altar of incense. But the thing is, that golden altar of incense was not in the Holy of Holies. It was right outside the curtain. But it says it's containing the golden altar of incense. So what's going on here? Oh, hey, look, we got Leif.
Oh, right on.
Hey, nice to see you, Leif.
Hey.
Christian was here, but his internet died because of the gins. So we press on. I'm talking about the Holy of Holies and what was actually in the Ark of the Covenant. So, yeah. Let's see. The altar of incense before the Holy of Holies was part of it, just as the great altar in front of the tabernacle was part of that. Then the description continues, enumerating all important things in the Holy of Holies, in which is related the Holy of Holies and not with the Ark of the Covenant. There is here a grammatical choice defined by what we know about the furnishing. The Ark of the Covenant is already mentioned, then followed the golden jar, Aaron's rod, and the tables of the covenant, with the 2 cherubim of the mercy seat above it. This guy, by the way, if he's hard to read, apologies, because English is not his first language. But the idea here is you have the Holy of Holies being described with the altar of incense included within the Holy of Holies, even though that it's actually outside the Holy of Holies. And so in the same sense, Aaron's rod and the golden jar of manna are in the Holy of Holies, but they're included in the Ark of the Covenant. So there's like a parallel where things outside are included within. And here's some Greek to get everybody more confused. Yeah, the entire Holy of Holies was being described together, and the Greek doesn't explicitly place all the articles within the ark. The sentence actually switches construction halfway through. So this is literally the Greek from an interlinear translation. This is going to read kind of weird in English. Containing golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. Inside the ark, gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. So here is a new, right? New is a, what is it? A preposition? Is that right? Oh, here we go. The word new does all the lifting for the interpretation. Did the writer mean inside the Holy of Holies or inside the ark? We must back up a step and consider the case of the altar's placement. Other passages locate the altar within the holy place, but not the Holy of Holies. Yet the writer to the Hebrews includes the altar inside the Holy of Holies. Why? There are several theories, but the most reasonable and most widely held is that the writer included the altar in association with the Holy of Holies, even though its physical location lay outside the veil. It is connected via ritual association, not local relations. There you go. That's the important thing. So the altar of incense is included within the Holy of Holies, but it's not talking locationally. It's talking ritually. In the same sense, the golden jar of manna and the staff are within the ark, with ritual association, not local association, not by locality. Okay, sorry.
Do you have Hebrews, or were you gonna read the next one?
Yeah, let me just finish this real quick, and then I can bring it back up. You're talking about just the context of the passage?
Yeah, just the verse.
Yeah, I can bring that up because I have it here. Let me just finish this real quick so I can continue to confuse people. If the connection made between the altar and the Holy of Holies was of a theological rather than a locational sense, then it's possible the same can be said for the gold jar, staff, and the ark. In summary, the passages from 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles refer to the stone tablets in their physical location, but the writer to the Hebrews refers to things contained within the ark in a theological sense. The gold jar, staff, and tablets are all theologically connected to the ark and can be said to be within or included with the ark in that sense. Thus, alleging a contradiction doesn't work since there's a better explanation given. Okay, now let me share Hebrews for you, and you can say what you were going to say. There you go.
So,
I bet my answer was really confusing. It looks like half of our audience dropped off. So if you guys are confused about it, let me know and I can try to explain it better.
yeah, because here it says specifically, inside the ark were the gold jar of manna, Aaron's
Right.
staff, and the stone tablets. What verse?
Right.
Berean. Yeah, because I was looking at ESV, and I noticed it says, so it's mentioning the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn But before that, it was talking about the holy place. So then it's a question of, well, in which is it referring to right before it, the Ark of the Covenant, or the totality of the space, which would be the Holy of Holies. So to me, like from what you were reading before, if it was the other way around, if Hebrews mentioned that these items were in the Holy of Holies, I wouldn't see the contradiction because the Ark of the Covenant is in the Holy of Holies. So everything,
Right.
but being that it's specific here, it seems that it's saying that these items are in the Ark.
I mean, you don't even have to go to the interlinear to see that in both First Kings and Second Chronicles, it's talking about the Ark being brought into Solomon's temple, but in Hebrews, it specifically says a tent, or rather the tabernacle, which is before the temple. So it's at two different times. So it's perfectly fine if the items that the Ark contained differed a little bit, because again, it's two different times.
That's what Ernest had originally said before you hopped on, Leif.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, actually,
Well,
this is actually. I was saying that it would happen after, but I didn't know. I should have read the entire chapter 9, because you're right. This is talking about the tabernacle, which came before the
were you talking
temple.
about what verse?
Well, 9:1,
Yeah.
or
The
9:2,
tabernacle was
for a
prepared.
tent was prepared. So this would be referring to the tabernacle, not the temple.
Right.
So I was thinking
Okay. I
it
see
could
what
have
you're saying.
changed
So,
after, but this would imply
yes.
that it changed before.
So
So in
are
the
you saying, Leif, are you saying that at the time of the tabernacle, it had all these things in it, and then later on, it just had the
Yes.
tablets? Okay.
Yeah, in the tabernacle, there's the golden urn holding the manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the tablets of the covenant. And then when it was brought into the temple, they removed.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
I know you jumped in halfway, Christian, but what do you think about this
No,
one?
and just what a great time for Leif to jump in.
I know.
What
Yeah,
a
that was
what a
awesome.
great point to add in.
Came in hitting strong.
I heard that Randy Orton, the watch out, watch out, watch out, as that was coming in.
Ding, 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 ding.
Hey, you can't see me.
Okay, so anybody that's still watching, because what I said was confusing, there's multiple possibilities for this to resolve it, or at least provide some kind of possible solution other than just saying it's a contradiction. If anybody saw the first episode that we did of this, maybe I should just keep this part around all the time. If you can show the possibility of harmonization, that negates the strength of any alleged contradiction. So somebody's going to say, oh, these two passages contradict, and you say, well, there's actually a more likely possibility of it being harmonized. Then the strength of the contradiction just goes away because you can show that there's a better option. And so before we say, yes, there's definitely a contradiction here, we just brought forth two different possible options that would explain it better than that.
What I like Leif's better than mine. So
it was
Christian,
nice and concise. That's
well,
for sure.
I missed the detail about the tent. So that's a
I did too.
major detail. Did you have
Christian,
anything?
You missed me nerding out about a little bit of Greek here.
Ooh, I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, what was the word? Anacoluth.
Let me. Yes, that's right. Let me just show that real quick. Where is that?
They have such big words because they turn their prepositions into prefixes and jam them onto the front of words, and then
so I have
blepo or whatever.
This word.
Anakaluthon.
A free enumeration in a loose narrative style. The point that's being made here in all of this gobbledygook is these things, the tablets, where is it? The tablets, the jar, and the staff are all theologically connected to the ark, so they're written about as being within the ark, but just in a theological sense, not a physical locale. In Hebrews, that's the
Prepositions too. I would never want to base. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were just gonna get on what I was about to say
Okay.
too.
I would never want to like base all of my theology on a preposition because, like, if you've studied languages, prepositions are pretty fluid in how they translate from one language into another. So if you're like looking at le or ve, like in Hebrew, or al, they're pros, meta, or even like going from Spanish to English, or you have the a, like the a before a person in Spanish, and you don't have any kind of analogy to that in English. And then
Is that
also in like
is that
in
not what's
Spanish
going
can
on
mean
right here?
inside of or on, which drives me nuts as an English speaker. I think I went out again.
We can hear you.
Anyway, if anyone can still hear me, I'm just saying that
Yes.
prepositions they're hard to translate.
Yes, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us, but we're good. Okay. Okay, all that nerdiness aside, let's keep on trucking. Oh, hey, look at that. Another thing that I forgot to include. Yeah,
That's a wonderful chart. Let's just give Julian.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. This word does a lot of lifting for anybody's interpretation. So.
Well, that's a definite article in Greek, and Greek is a declined language. So from your articles, you can tell a whole lot of information that you don't get in English. You can almost use it like a preposition. So you could say, tu crusu, and it would be like of the gold. And then if it was te with a iota subscript, it would be to the gold is in like in the dative, like an indirect object. And then it'd be tain cruson if it's an accusative, and that's a direct object. So if something's being done to the gold. So with your articles, you can tell a whole lot in Greek.
Yeah. And that's where the alleged contradiction stems from. There's confusion over that, but yeah. Okay, number 37. So Leif, since you joined just a few minutes ago, why don't you read this one?
Yeah, 1 Kings 15:14. The high places were not removed, was Asa perfect. The high places were not removed, but Asa's heart was fully devoted to the Lord all his days. 2 Chronicles 16:7, 10, and 12. At that time, Hanani the seer came to King Asa of Judah and told him, because you have relied upon the king of Aram and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hand. Asa was angry with the seer and became so enraged over this matter that he put the man in prison. And at the same time, Asa oppressed some of the people. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet, and his malady, I don't even know what that word is, malady, became increasingly severe. Yet even in his illness, he did not seek the Lord, but only the physicians.
Malady is a disease. Yeah, so was Asa perfect or not?
I don't think you have to interpret the first one to be him being perfect.
Well, in the King James, real quick, in the King James it says Asa's heart was perfect with the Lord all his days. But that doesn't say his conduct was perfect with the Lord. It says his heart was perfect with the Lord. So even there, it's talking about like his devotion to God.
In Genesis, it says that Noah was perfect in his generation, but obviously Noah wasn't perfect in the literal sense that we mean it, but rather whatever word it is for perfect doesn't have the same meaning as the English perfect, and that's why the better translation is fully devoted. Because King David, he was fully devoted to
right, a man after God's own heart.
Exactly, but
he sinned. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was just thinking of like this with my own life. Or in law, you do this where you only give like out a certain set of facts about a certain person if you're trying to paint them in a certain way. Like I could
Mhm.
make myself look like such a terrible person by only telling you the bad things I've done in my past.
Yes.
Humans are very, very complex. So if I was just like, yeah, when I was 19, I got in a fist fight with a guy because, he was insulting my shoes, and I became an atheist when I was 25. And then that's just all I told you.
Man, what a
Um,
terrible guy.
I was trying to think of all these random facts about myself. I've been in 2 fist fights, but I'm trying to frame the
Jeez.
second one in a way where it's hard to make that one make me look like a bad guy. It's just that I got in 2
see?
fist fights, and I don't. Yeah, you see.
You see, this is the Christians that they put forward.
Yeah. Paul's a good example. If all you did was
Yes.
talk about how he's killing the church and going from house to house and intercepting letters in Jerusalem so he can find Christians to kill, and you don't tell us anything else about Paul, right? Because I could say that Paul was devoted to the Lord all his days, and that would be true about him, but he still did terrible things.
Yes. I have a couple notes here on the Hebrew in this one, so Christian, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the Hebrew word Salem, Salem, is used in First Kings, and it's rendered as perfect in the King James, but the connotation is complete, and it follows the Hebrew word lebab, meaning heart, mind, will, inner man. So the idea is that his inner self was completely devoted to God.
It has the same sharesh. So the Hebrew has 3-letter roots. It has the same one as shalom. It just doesn't have the vav. And shalom can be like peace, completeness, safety, that sort of feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, instead of like moral perfection.
Yeah.
Right.
I got something. I
Oh,
got
go
something
ahead.
on this one. So when I was looking at his heart being fully devoted to God, or even perfect, as the King James says, perfect. What was it? Perfect.
Perfect in his heart.
Perfect in his heart to the Lord.
His heart
Like
was perfect with the Lord all his days. There you
with the
go.
Lord. So to me, the key part of that, understanding what it's talking about, is to the that it's to the Lord. It's perfect to the Lord, or fully devoted to the Lord, not other gods. So yeah, he was a sinner, but he was fully devoted to God and not other gods. So to me, I don't see where where in either case the claim is that he's perfect. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither.
So
Congratulations, you can read correctly and not be obtuse
Unlike
about it.
certain people's prophets.
Yeah.
That was good.
As everybody knows, Muhammad can't read.
I can't read. It's a silly voice.
I was watching a stream from David and AP. I don't remember which one it was recently, but David was talking about the fact that Vocab Malone, he was just kind of like the first person they went to see if he would be Muhammad in the Boom Boomer videos, and he turned out to absolutely smash it. And David was like, I don't care if the best actors in the world were lined up behind him, I'd still choose Vocab because he's just perfect at it.
He does so good at that role.
He's so good at it. Everybody needs to go watch the recent one about Muhammad versus the Queers for Palestine, because at the end when he hits the button and he just goes, eh, it just made me crack up so much, and it's just so good.
I wish that we could have been there to witness him
Witness him do that.
Yeah, because when we were there, we saw. I don't think we talked about this before, like what they were recording when we were there.
I don't remember. Maybe we did a little bit.
It was the poisoning.
Yeah, that video's not
Kaibar.
out yet. Right.
So
Right. There was another video they recorded that's out already, but the one that we saw is not out yet.
Yeah, I think they had done it like the day prior, because he spits food in Mary's face, and what's her channel name? Two Marys.
Too many Marys.
Too many Marys. I think he
Mary
spits.
Harb.
Yeah. So I think he's like eating the food. And I guess he realizes it's poison, and he spits it out. And her face happens to be there. And so we missed that part. That would have been hilarious. But we did get to see Hatun pouring a variety
Foul
of
stuff.
a variety of poisons and nasty stuff all over his food.
Rat poison. Was it like windshield wiper cleaner, antifreeze, like all kinds of gross stuff?
Yeah, she held the pencil sharpener and she started sharpening.
Oh, yeah.
It was like pencil shavings. They had. Oh, and I was wondering, like, why do they have candy bar wrappers all over the place? And then I realized when she opened up that diaper and let.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot they melted chocolate.
Has this one not been made yet?
This
or is
one
it
is
already
not
out there?
It's not. It's in the process. It's not been put out
Okay,
yet.
it's just not edited.
It's the death of Muhammad.
How many did y'all film that day?
That day was 2, and then there was one prior to that on the previous day. But we can't say neither for I keep saying Forrest, but neither Ernest nor I can really say that we were a part of the recording process because we were just kind of sitting there. But we also went home early, and they recorded literally all night. So, yeah, we missed a bunch.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that one turns out. You know, because I didn't really know, kind of the details of it, and I saw Hatun with her shirt, and I didn't realize that it was part of the video.
Do
you remember what her shirt said?
Death to Muhammad.
Yeah.
And I'm putting out a vlog on this conference that we just went to, and on Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Yeah, that's the 3rd episode, and that has a little bit of behind the scenes stuff from there. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we were part of that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm gonna have to keep moving because we need to finish these before we stay here too long. But if you have one final comment, go ahead.
Now I was going to talk about the. I don't think we mentioned the birthday cake.
Yeah, we could say that for next time.
That was pretty funny.
There's a Quran birthday party because the Quran is 100 years old. Yeah, we'll leave it at there. We got 3 left, I think. Okay, so we just talked about Asa not being perfect, or Asa. Did he remove the high places? 2 Chronicles 14, he removed the foreign altars and the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and chopped down the Asherah poles. He commanded the people of Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to observe the law and the commandments. He also removed the high places and incense altars from all the cities of Judah, and under him the kingdom was at peace. Verses 1 Kings 15, the high places were not removed, but Asa's heart was fully devoted to the Lord all his days. What do you think?
I mean, I saw it the same way that you did in your notes. It specifically says Judah in 2 Chronicles, and then
yes, not Israel.
Right. It seems to differentiate the two.
Yeah, he removed the high places from Judah, but not from Israel. Just read the text.
Yeah, that was easy.
Cool. If you guys have any other comments on it, go ahead.
You see, Jesus was a Muslim.
Thanks.
No, you can tell he's a Muslim, though, because he submitted to the Father.
Oh, okay, nice. I thought you just got Christian going on a whole tangent again.
No, I'm making fun. When God Logic was talking to Ali Dawah, and he asked him how he could know he's a Muslim, and he responded, because he submitted to the Father, which anyone who's read the Quran knows Surah 112, Allah is not a father. Well, and a bunch of other
Wait,
places too.
who said that?
God Logic or Ali
Oh,
Dawa?
I thought you were gonna say Ali Dawa said that.
Ali Dawa was arguing that he was a Muslim because he submitted
Yes.
to the
Okay.
Father. To the
Oh.
Father. He said, yeah, he quotes it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Whoa. Oh
I
no.
got a
It
video
is.
on that going out.
Oh man, it is as bad as I thought it was. Ugh.
Yeah.
What do they say when they try to bida bida?
Well, he challenges on him, and then he responds, well, we're just quoting that to show that Jesus isn't divine. It's like, that's not even, we were arguing whether he's a Muslim or not. What are you talking about divinity? And then he presses him on that. He's like, no, it's to bring up whether he's a Muslim or not. And then he goes, well, the Bible's been corrupted. It's like, jeez.
Yikes.
Okay.
Okay. Number 39. How many? Oh, that's actually 2 of these in the same 10. Awesome. How many of Asaph's offspring returned from Babylon? We already talked about this stream, but this is yet another one that seems to pit Ezra and Nehemiah against each other. Ezra made a list of all the people that came back from Babylon, but they were the people that left from Babylon. And then Nehemiah finds a list 100 years later, which seems to have different numbers because people could have been added to the stream of people leaving Babylon and going to Jerusalem, or they could have left the stream of people and the numbers would have changed. I didn't make this note earlier. Both of the lists have the same number at the end, which is 42,360, but the numbers don't add up to 42,360, which seems to indicate not that they're bad at math, but that it's a symbolic number, because there's a lot of symbolic numbers in Scripture. And both 42 and 360 are, by themselves, symbolic numbers. I don't know what the symbology of it would be. If you guys know, chime in. But, yeah, I didn't mention that earlier, so.
Yeah, no, I came up with the same thing you did. They 2 different time periods, different number of descendants.
Or if you read verse 5 in Nehemiah 7, he literally says, I found a book. Here's what it said.
Yeah. That's it. Ooh, big contradiction. Okay. Number 40. When did Jesus ascend into heaven? Ernest, you want to read this one?
When Jesus had led them out as far as Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was carried up into heaven. Keep going.
Yeah, go ahead. Just read them all.
John 20:26. 8 days later, his disciples were once again inside with the doors locked, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Acts 13.
Peace
31.
be upon you. What? Hey, what?
What?
Peace be upon you. He's a Muslim.
Did I say peace be upon
No,
you?
no.
Let's see. And for many days he was seen by those who had accompanied him from Galilee to Jerusalem. They are now his witnesses to our people.
You see. What do you guys think about this contradiction? Is it even a contradiction just on the face of it?
Nope.
I've got some notes
Yeah,
on it, but I just wanted to give you guys time to answer.
You're giving me time to look awkward because I don't see a contradiction, and so I don't know what to counter argument with.
That's fine. I don't mind awkward.
Yeah, I mean, is the contradiction after speaking with them as opposed to while he blessed them? Because both can be true.
I'm just going to read my notes on it. At first blush, this seems like a ridiculous thrust at a contradiction, but it all hinges on the timeline in Luke 24. It seems that those series of events happen only after a day or two. Jesus appeared to the 2 disciples on the road, then the next day he appears to the 11, then he led them out to Bethany and ascended. This contradicts other passages that say it's at least 8 days or as many as 40 days that Jesus remained on the earth before he ascended. So the timeline of Luke kind of makes it seem like there's only a few days between the resurrection and the ascension, but other places talk about 40 days. So, yeah, I don't see a contradiction. Congratulations. You can think normally. Yeah. What I wrote for the solution to this is, in Luke, he tells them to remain in Jerusalem until later. No explicit timeline given. So it can't be used to say that it contradicts other passages directly. It leaves the door open for 40 days.
Yeah, it's almost like they need a new word instead of contradiction, because I'm not seeing. It's like I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Yes. Better word would be desperation. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because some accounts provide more details than others, and just because certain accounts omit some details, but the timeline still matches up, that's not a contradiction. Like, in terms of from the resurrection on, Matthew, you see the empty tomb, and then it kind of jumps to the Great Commission. For Mark, it's the empty tomb. Then it mentions how Jesus, revealed himself to two disciples traveling, as in the road to Emmaus, but it didn't go in depth on that. And then you see the Great Commission / ascension. For Luke, it goes from the empty tomb, a lot of details on the road to Emmaus, and then you see his ascension. John, you see the empty tomb, disciples in the locked room. He appears to 7. He talks to Peter. He talks to John, and then you don't see or hear about the ascension in John, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen, because that's still in the timeline of the other gospel accounts in
Right.
which it perfectly fits.
Yes.
So it's
they
like,
knew what they were writing about.
Yeah, I don't know who brought it up during the conference in that godforsaken land of Ohio. Someone said, it's like, okay, if I go to this conference and I talk to person A, or I talk to person A, B, and C, but then 2 days later, when I'm telling what happened at the conference, I mention that I talked to person A, and I tell another person I talked to person C. That's not a contradiction. It's all just different details of the same story.
Yes. They don't have to all have exactly the same details, and they don't all have to have every detail of everything that happened.
And if they did say everything that the other gospel said, people would just say, oh, look, they just copied.
Exactly. Anybody know J. Warner Wallace? He's got a book called Person of Interest, where he's a former cold case detective, and he did his cold case detective magic on the person of Jesus and just studied him to see if the gospel accounts would check out as legitimate eyewitness accounts. And he came to the conclusion that they do. And one of the things that he says is, when he's looking to solve some kind of cold case, if there's multiple witnesses that come forward and they all have exactly the same or pretty much the same story with only slightly different details, he immediately gets suspicious, because he starts thinking maybe they conspired. Maybe they decided to polish their story up and, all say the same thing. And if that's the case, what are they hiding? Right.
It's the same thing I said from a legal perspective earlier.
Yes, exactly. So if you have multiple eyewitnesses in probably every case, if every court case, every cold case in history, now that's a big claim, but I'm just guessing, there's gonna be contradictions between the eyewitness accounts. Between people nowadays. That just happens. People contradict each other, but then you pull the truth out of that. It's a different thing when we're talking about the gospel narratives. But even if you allow for the possibility of contradictions in the narrative, that doesn't mean that they're not reliable narratives, because that's just how people talk. They contradict one another in details, but yet the true event still happened. Apparently,
Autoptai kai hupeirtai are like people who
can't-
keep the scrolls in a synagogue and eyewitnesses. And both of those are mentioned in Luke chapter 1, verse 2.
oh, nice.
So just as I received from the beginning from scroll keepers and eyewitnesses, I give to you. He's talking to Theophilus in his intro.
We have, he did not ascend because he did not die on the cross.
Ignore that guy.
157. But then perfect question. Why did he like to be kissed on his belly?
If you want to figure out the answer to that question, you see the video by David Wood.
No. Was this Fadi, was this Dia? I can't remember if this was Dia or somebody else that he was talking about. Oh, wait, he didn't have the full quote there. And the man embraced him and began to kiss his side. Then he said, "This is what I wanted, messenger of Allah."
It's also in the Queers for Palestine Boom Boom Room episode.
It is.
There you go. Yes.
It
Okay,
is.
so maybe it was Dia. Maybe it was Dia. Or sorry, I mean the angel Gabriel. If nobody knows what I mean, there's hadith that say that somebody went over to Muhammad's house and they saw Dia leaving, and they were like, "Oh, hey, what were you doing here with Dia?" And he was like, and Muhammad was like, "Oh, that wasn't Dia, that was the angel Gabriel."
I don't think that would work with my wife. She walked in, it was the angel Gabriel. That only works in a situation where the person in charge has the ability to cut off anyone's head who disagrees with it. It's the only time you can pull that off.
Yes.
But if you can, alhamdulillah.
Yes. Well, we reached number 40, so that's it for contradictions for tonight. If you guys want to shoot the breeze about some dumb thing
I got
in Islamic history, then
if
go
God
ahead.
is all powerful and all knowing and all good, how come you kept forgetting to bring up your charts every time we got to a new verse?
Because I am not God.
Oh, okay. You got me.
Well, and
Got
like,
him.
what,
Allah tricked him into forgetting that he had them.
He pelted his memory with stars.
Yes.
well, Julian, what you were talking about earlier about the different perspectives. Like, can you imagine if our Bible only had the book of Matthew and it didn't have Mark, Luke, and John? You know, it's like, I'm really grateful that we do have the 4 different perspectives on the same events. You know, even if,
Mhm.
Oh, I 100% agree. I was just going to say, if we only had one, there'd be no variance. But it's like, I would so much rather have 4.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our
Yes.
manuscript tradition. We're like, there's so many
Yes,
things that
yes.
contradict. Yeah, it's because we have over 5,000 of them. Like if you look at the Aeneid or the Iliad or Plutarch's Lives or the Republic or any other book, you have to wait like usually about 500 years to 1,000 years to get a full manuscript.
Okay, now you got me thinking. Hold on. I mentioned at the beginning that I'm doing a class with my church. I was just putting together a whole bunch of presentations and things, and it's along this lines, all this kind of stuff. And I just have to share this chart.
Found it, Ernest. Were you going to say more? I interrupted you. I
oh no,
apologize.
I was just going to say, you know, it's interesting that the skeptics claim that our greatest weakness, in my opinion, is our greatest strength.
Mhm.
You know, it's the diversity of scripture and the vast amount of manuscripts that we have that allow for those like I guess like differences in information, instead of it just being this one like siloed account, like you said, like the Iliad, and you know.
I like too that it's the product of a whole community as opposed to just a single Quran made by one guy who got a private revelation. You have this entire community who's reacting to this person. They ran into this person, Jesus. Their lives were changed forever, and they all independently came up with these products. And then the all the literature of the early church is a product of a whole community working together as opposed to one person.
Yes. Take a look at this chart. This is what we were just talking about. I'm going to actually back up one slide. This is the New Testament compared to other texts. Plato. Nobody disagrees that Plato legitimately existed and that his writings are, usable and reliable and all that kind of stuff. There are 7 existing copies of his work, and the year between the original and the first copy is 1,200 years.
Yeah, and if there's any skeptic watching this and they don't believe this chart, just go look this up like with an AI. Like go type it into Google Gemini and look it up. It'll tell you exactly what we're saying here.
Bart Ehrman will corroborate this.
I have a quote from misquoting Jesus.
Misquoting Jesus. I have that same quote.
Yeah,
I know exactly. Yes, I have that same quote ready. I'll bring that up in a second. Julius Caesar. 10 copies of his works, 1,000 years between them. Aristotle, 49 copies, 1,400 years. The Iliad. Everybody read this in high school. We don't doubt that it existed and that it's a reliable text as to what the original said. 640 copies. That's a lot. 500 years between the New Testament. 24,000 copies. Now I think that number is a little bit bloated because if you take the Greek manuscripts, it's about 5,900 right now, and then there's 10,000 Latin, and then there's 10,000 in other languages. So they're kind of rounding. This is a bit of an older chart. This is from 2015. They're kind of rounding to 24,000. And the years between them, though, are 40 to 70 years. There's no comparison here. Look at this. These circles represent the number of manuscripts that we have. And then these lines tell you the difference in years between the original and the first copy. It's just, the New Testament is in its own category. Nothing else comes close. So there you go.
Amen.
I think this is the last. Oh, no. There we go. The essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. Bart Ehrman, misquoting Jesus.
I was going to kick out of seeing Bart Ehrman because he looks very similar to my high school basketball coach.
Here's two really good books here. So it's a 2-volume set, and it gives like all of the Greek manuscripts from before 400 in a 2-volume set. You get the unicals and the papyri, and it's just great. I've been going through it. It's amazing how close it is to just the Bible that you have sitting on your desk.
Who's it by?
It's let's see, Philip Wesley Comfort, David P. Barrett, and publishers Comfort Barrett.
But you see, the Quran is perfectly preserved. The Bible might be preserved 99%, but the Quran is preserved 100%. Alhamdulillah.
Well, if you think that's the case, then you might want to also check out Corrections in Early Quran Manuscripts by Daniel Brubaker. One last.
Oh yeah, this is true. Fadi says Bart actually removed that quote in later copies of his book. That is true. If you look up the elusive Bart Ehrman quote, you will find this. In the first copy of Misquoting Jesus, there's a Q&A section in the back, and he actually says that the essential Christian doctrines are not, not destroyed by the textual variants in the manuscripts, or not affected. And then later on in the second and third editions of that book, it doesn't exist anymore. That quote is not there anymore.
His own books are more corrupted than the Bible is.
It's okay. He abrogated it.
Yeah, it's an
He
abrogation.
abrogated.
It's kind of funny how it's just like from a Muslim perspective, they're like,
Wait, really?
we accept the Bible when it agrees with the Quran, and then reject it when it doesn't. That's the exact same line of thinking. Like, oh man, this could help who I disagree with, therefore I have to retract.
Allah made him forget.
Well, and I think it's one thing to have like a revision where you change something and maybe he changes his mind on that statement. But if he did it because of some type of response from his audience or whatever, it seems
Yeah.
like I'd like to know what was the reason. Is he trying to hide the fact that he said it, or does he no longer believe it?
Well, this is still in there, and this is from page 87 of his book, Misquoting Jesus.
Is that a first edition?
I don't think so. I bought this
autograph?
like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So then
An autograph? No autographs exist anymore. It always, whenever you look up any kind of ancient document, like in an AI, it always warns you there's no longer an autograph. Unfortunately, there's no. It's like, duh. Of course, there's not going to be an autograph of the Iliad. Okay. Therefore, the 30,000 variants uncovered by Mill do not detract from the integrity of the New Testament. They simply provide the data that scholars need to work on to establish the text, a text that is more amply documented than any other from the ancient world. That's from
Yes.
Bart Ehrman.
Wow. Since we are kind of just talking about whatever now, there was a guy who was spamming a whole bunch of stuff in the chat earlier, and he said something that got me thinking. I want to see. He was saying a whole bunch of stuff that seemed like it was kind of nonsense. I wonder if he's still watching. That'd be kind of cool. He could explain himself. But where is it?
Oh, you're talking about
This guy.
yeah.
I don't know if he's just memeing or not.
This
So
feels
I look-
memey.
It
I
does
looked
feel
at
ahead.
his
memey.
journal. Apparently, he said he had a vision and it's about the end times, and it's one of those
Oh no.
off his rocker
Was he influenced by Brandon Biggs?
or Hennessy. I don't know, one of the two.
Do you guys know who Brandon Biggs is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's the dude who supposedly prophesied the Trump thing, but didn't actually. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, and he's also prophesied a bunch of other garbage.
But then he got Mike Wingard.
Then you got Mike Wingard. Yeah, add another one to the list. Dude, Benny Hinn is seething because of Mike Wingard.
He got
Oh,
wing-a-linged.
That was beautiful. He got wing-a-linged. You're exactly right.
I mean, it was amazing. He did have some details in there that I thought were interesting, but
Sure, a broken clock is right.
If that
twice
was
a
his
day.
only prophecy, I would have been like, okay, that's interesting. Right.
Yeah.
If he had no
Yeah, yeah.
other, like, if
Right.
he was just like, I'm a normal guy and I'm trying to make a salad and suddenly I see this and I don't know what to do, guys. I saw this. This is what I saw. And then, 3 months later, I'd be like, okay, maybe that was something. There's something to that. That's pretty crazy. But if you like look at his channel and look at his stuff, there's just like thousands of prophecies.
yeah, because I think he mentioned him being shot in the ear, right? So I thought like there were some specifics in there that were impressive, but
no, he just
think
said the bullet went by his ear.
It went by
The
him.
prophecy
and then he
was
had
that
a
the
vision
bullet
of him
went by
dodging
his
like
ear.
the Matrix, and then his eardrum burst or something like that.
And
But
he
didn't
just
he
did
clips
not.
off at the beginning of his prophecy. He talked about Trump wearing a red tie, and he wasn't wearing a red tie that day. And he also said that he saw mountains in the background, and there weren't any mountains where he was in, I think, Pennsylvania.
The thing that really sealed it for me that Mike brought up was this guy made a video like the day of or the day after or something like that. Like, hey, this is the prophecy that I had. See, I was right. But if he really was a prophet from God and he really had a vision from God that told him all these things were going to happen, why didn't he the night before say, hey, this is going to happen tomorrow? Christians pray about it. pray for the safety of Trump or something like that. Why didn't he say it's going to happen now? Why is it some nebulous time in the future, and then after something similar happens, he goes, "See, I was right." So it's kind of fishy.
I do want to say here, though, real quick, I do believe in prophecy, and I think there are people out there who've had legitimate prophecies. So I won't deny something just because it's a prophecy, and I laugh
That's
at that.
fine.
Oh, it's supernatural, ha ha ha. But I was like entertaining this guy thinking about it until Mike Winger's video. So
Yeah.
anyone
Yep.
out there who's wondering, I would suggest they go see that video.
I am not. I'm open to the idea of prophecy happening nowadays. I just haven't seen examples of it yet. So I'm leaving the door open. I'm not a cessationist. Although if cessationism turns out to be true, then I'll believe it. You know, I want the truth. But things like this give prophecy a bad name, and gives Christians a bad name. Makes Christians it definitely makes a lot of Christians way too involved in politics in a bad way. If you want to get involved in politics, go lobby people to abolish abortion. How about that?
Well, and I think being that he was specific on some of the details, to me, it's like, prophecy isn't like a hand grenade, or playing horseshoes. It's like it's either completely right or it's not. So
Yes.
it's got to be right on target, I think. So I mean, while I was impressed that some of the details were pretty right on overall, I feel like in that follow-up video that he did, I thought he kind of overstated his claims. Mike Winger did a good job at kind of pointing out the differences between what he said and what he claimed to say afterwards. But he seemed to be kind of adding in some details that he didn't originally say. But
This is the standard from the Bible. You may ask in your heart, how can we recognize a message that the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord and the message does not come to pass or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. Meaning, do not follow him. You get one shot. If you're wrong once, you're out.
Actually, the other day in I forget what video it was. I just had a couple time back and forth, nothing malicious. I said something like, I had your take, Julian, where I'm like, I'm open to, prophetic words, prophecy, but it's got to line up with, or it's got to actually happen or line up with scripture. But then what I also said, the initial comment, I said something like, if you call yourself a prophet, like that's an instant, I'm not listening to you. And this person was like, oh, that's heresy. How can you accept prophecy but not prophethood, or someone being a prophet? It's like, we don't have prophets nowadays. I don't know.
And I talked about
I found it funny. There's a difference between the spirit, and he quoted like Joel 2, the spirit will come upon the earth and your young men or your sons and daughters will prophesy. It's like that doesn't mean they're prophets. They're filled with the spirit and prophesy. That's something different than being a prophet. But
I was going to say, I did a video defending accusations against Paul by Muhammad Hijab. And Paul, he never even calls himself a prophet. And I've had where I think God spoke to me and then a thing happened. I would never call myself a prophet. It's just God told me something and then it happened.
Right.
So it's almost like whenever a situation like that does happen, it's totally out of my control. It's never about me. I'm like a bug on a windshield in a spiritual reality that's so much bigger than I am. Like I'm totally unimportant.
Yeah.
And
then,
so,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, you're.
Or just like if you watch his channel, it's like, this proves that I'm right. And now I'm seeing that there's a fire in Paris. And it's like he's trying to get attention and have everybody wound up and looking at him and saying that he's right. And it's like, dude, it is not about you.
Yeah. And especially on this side of the cross, like you look at Old Testament offices, Jesus was the fulfillment of all of them. You know, if you want to say prophet, judge, king, priest, you know, goes on and on. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't offices in the church now, but that's something different. So
Right.
Jesus was the fulfillment of all of the roles we see in the Old Testament. So no, we're not.
But Muhammad is the seal of the prophets.
I was thinking that. I was like, I don't want to derail us again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we keep going back to Islam. Just keep beating down on Islam.
See, it's the truth. Well, you mentioned
Do
Paul.
Muslims have a persecution complex?
Sort of.
More like
in the
a
West,
persecutor
they do.
complex.
Yeah, they're more Nietzschean than Christians are, or woke people.
What do you mean?
So there's more will to power. There's more. You are a weakling if you doubt. You know, like But there's definitely like a whining if they feel it's legitimate, right? Like, you know, Muslims are sometimes wrongly bullied for being Muslim.
True.
You know?
True. But it doesn't make the religion true.
Right. Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you guys
What?
think of the Olympics?
I gotta
ceremony?
go right now with kid stuff, but I appreciate
Okay.
you guys having me. I'll see you next
See
time.
ya.
See ya.
Yeah, he is quick with those exits. I tell you.
I don't know when I hit end stream if it actually ends that quickly, because sometimes it looks like we're just sitting there awkwardly for a few seconds. So I kind of hope it's the same. But hey, when the kids call you, sometimes you just gotta go.
I mean, I saw they tried to retract it and say, "Oh, this wasn't supposed to be the Last Supper. This was some painting here about Dionysus, you know, the Greek god of partying."
Sure.
It's like, well, look at the, you know. Now, to be fair, there were more than 12 associates with the whoever was sitting in the middle, but I don't buy it. I don't buy
I
it.
think possibly they made it so that there's plausible deniability, where they could say, no, that's not what we're shooting for. But really, behind the scenes, maybe that is what we're doing. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was just thinking that as far as like the most recent thing in current events that's, you know, related to Christian kind of persecution in a way. And you know, I have a design background, so I look at things kind of, I guess, you know, through that lens, and I'm actually kind of surprised that they took the route that they did. You know, they're claiming that, you know, oh well, we didn't mean for it to be Christian and this and that. I mean, it's like I've seen clips of it, and it looks like they've got, you know, the rider on the pale horse. It's like one of the horses of the apocalypse, you know, and then it kind of moves into a frame where it's like this, the horse has wings. So they're trying to make this like angelic kind of like symbolism. And you know, and then, you know, I've seen like the side-by-sides between the Last Supper painting and that frame of what they did, you know, where they're all at the table and they're all moving. They're actually moving as if it's like it's performance art of the Last Supper. I mean, it's so obvious that I'm kind of shocked that they took the response of saying that it has nothing to do with Christianity.
Or the halo like thing on the person in the middle's head.
Halo. I mean, even if you look at, there's like the two uprights that's behind them, you know, there's two verticals. It lines up perfectly if you overlay the Last Supper with where the walls kind of converge into you've got the two side walls converging into the vertical union of the side walls to the back wall. It matches up so perfectly that it's I mean, it's ridiculous that they would say that it's not related. I mean, if it were me, I would have taken the other response and said, you know, that we're offended that Christians are offended. Why can't these particular individuals be, you know, part of the scene of the Last Supper or something like that? But maybe I shouldn't give them any ideas of, you know, turning the tables. I mean, it's so
Oh,
obviously
they
over
don't
the
need your
top.
help.
Right.
Turning
Well,
the
I mean,
tables, really?
well,
What a joke.
I mean, well, but I would have,
Nice pun.
right, right. But I would have just kind of, that would have been my take if I was arguing it from their perspective or from the artist's perspective. That would have been my take. Is like, well, why are Christians offended? Like, you can't have, you know, drag queens at, you know, at the table with Jesus, and he, you know, he was with tax collectors and this and that. But it's so obvious that it was intended to be upsetting to the faithful.
Mm.
You know, you've got the men dressed like women, like, you know, like basically wearing woman face, and then they had the child that kind of joins in with the scene. So I mean, it's obvious that it was like it was performance art from an activist perspective.
Yeah, you'll never see them depicting Muhammad going around making his nightly rounds.
No, and especially in France, where they have a really they're having a lot of issues with the, you know, the Muslim immigration. They would never.
Hmm.
Well,
They,
yeah, and a few years back they had what was it, the Charlie Hebdo thing?
Oh, yeah.
right, right.
So
Yeah, and I would imagine things have
Yeah.
only gotten worse since then. So,
If you want to, go ahead. Sorry, I don't mean to
well, I was
interrupt
just
you.
gonna say, at this point, it's not like they claim that it's bravery to be, you know, oh, look at us, we're challenging, you know, we're challenging the religious institutions and that sort of thing. But it's no longer brave. It's just kind of boring. You know, like when I was in art school, the same sort of, you know, it's been a while, but like it was the same type of people kind of trying to push the envelope, and like they're doing something new and exciting, and but it was just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of, I thought it was kind of like a cheap out. It's like, you know, we're going to put, you know, back in the day, it was like you had the artist that put the crucifix in urine, and it's just boring. You know, it's not even interesting art. You know, it's just boring. It's like, hey, let's take something that people revere, let's do something disrespectful to
Shocking.
it. Yeah, and it's like, oh, we're shocking. It's just cheap. It's cheap, and I think it lacks any kind of like deep thought. So so I kind of enjoyed, actually I was glad that it was happening, because I enjoyed the pushing back on it, and
Hmm.
I took it as an opportunity to go, uh I guess, like to embrace my Christian faith and kind of present it back to my classmates, you know, and and so anyway, we could talk about it another time. But I had some fun projects, and where I was kind of involved with, like, sharing my faith in a way that these particular students had expressed that they'd never experienced um, Christianity being presented in that way. So I'm kind of glad that I went through went through that experience with dealing with, you know, I guess like hardcore anti, you know, anti-religious people.
yeah,
Fadi just put this comment in here, and I just looked it up, and I think this is
it
interesting.
it is
So,
cool. It is cool.
yeah. So, this is some weird website, but it's a news website, so I'll take it. There's a massive power outage in Paris right before this controversial opening ceremony, and the only light that was still on was a church. Dude.
Coincidence? I think not.
Oh, I see it. Okay. I was like, wait, there's one light on here, but that could be someone's personal light. But like the only building that has lights still is a church. So let me get this
Yeah,
image up.
I heard that after that ceremony that that there was like a big power outage, and I thought, well, that's really cool, but it's next level to hear that that the only light was the light from a church.
And it's like a cathedral too, so it stands out. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I'm just thinking, hallelujah.
Right.
Dude, based.
Right. Yeah.
Dang.
it's interesting how things like that occur. You know,
I,
it's like there's
I'm
no coincidences.
I was just gonna say I'm hesitant to say sometimes people. Well, let me back up. Sometimes people are really fast with hitting the "that was God" button, and I'm hesitant to hit that button sometimes. But when you see something like this, it's like, how much more do you need? How much more proof? How much more
Ooh.
knocks on the head do you need? Wake up! Wake up! Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was talking with with someone earlier, and they had mentioned that I think there was a recent Pride parade in Rio de Janeiro, and right after it, there was a big flood, and it washed everything away.
Oh
Um,
man.
and then I remember, what was it, a couple months ago when the Pope came out and he was kind of affirming of I forget what it was in particular, but if it was same sex marriage or something like that. Um, and it was like that next day, the statue of Saint Peter in his hometown was struck by lightning,
Whoa.
and it was what was it? He was holding something up like some reeds or something like that. It's basically like the symbol for power and or his authority, and that's what was the lightning. It blew that hand off, basically saying that the Pope no longer has authority over the church. So it was definitely like there's a connection because of all the places in the world it happened in the Pope's hometown.
Hmm. In a similar vein, there was some mural put up in the past of George Floyd, I think in the town where he died, and it was struck by lightning, like on the face of the mural. And I don't think
Uh,
anything else was damaged. It was just the mural. I was like, whoa,
I don't.
okay.
I don't remember hearing about that.
Well,
I would have heard about that.
I'm just totally lying to you. Haha. No, let me find it.
Yeah, because I'm from Minneapolis, so some under a
Oh,
rock.
okay. So I guess it wasn't in Minneapolis. It was a mural put up somewhere else. Sorry about that. But it did happen. Let me just find a website where I don't have to pay to look at the news. Come on. Okay. Oh, maybe that's why. Because it's a mural of George Floyd, but they put a crown on top of it, like King George. And then it got obliterated.
Mm.
Hold on, let me find it. Share screen. There you go.
Jeez.
Oh wow.
Dude. The whole side of the building's ripped off.
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I don't think God divinely struck down a mural.
No, no. But here's something funny. Change of mind. You know what that makes me think of? Change of mind. You know what is often a change of mind in scripture? Repent.
Mm. Wow.
Repent. Yeah. So it looked like that. And then there you go. Wild.
Yeah. There's also a church at 9/11 when the buildings came down that that was still standing.
Yes.
When the rubble came down,
Yes. Yes.
it was going towards the church, and it was I think it was like a sycamore tree that protected it, and
Whoa.
they they replaced the sycamore with a cedar, and it was basically like I forget which verse it is, but it's a verse about divine judgment, and uh and that's exactly what they had done was they replaced the sycamore with a cedar.
This photo is so cool. This let's see. This 9/11 news what do you call it? Headline. Gosh, I can't speak. This headline is called "The Chapel That Stood," which is just an awesome title. But here you go. Look at that. Rubble and paper everywhere. And then
Is
it's
this
just
the one
standing.
at
I
Ground
think so.
Zero?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, it
was
was.
a different context. I'd say that's a really cool photo.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about the church too is that was the church when I think it was the first House of Congress was there, and George Washington made I believe he made a covenant with God and that church, in that church um, before the capital was moved to Washington D.C.
Whoa.
Well, wasn't the capital the Philadelphia? Pretty sure it was Philadelphia.
Yeah, it was like I don't know the details of it. It was in that book, the
Oh, maybe
the
it was
Harbinger.
this. Maybe it was this church. I don't know. There's two churches like right there. But this one has that tree you're talking about, so I don't know.
Yeah, it was in the book, The Harbinger.
Okay. Maybe it was this. Oh, no, okay. Maybe this is what it is. This was like a sanctuary for people during 9/11, but maybe it was this one that stood during that time that didn't get destroyed. I mean, it looks like it's close to the towers, so yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's like right by the towers. So maybe it was that one. But there's no tree there, so I don't know.
Yeah, it says destroyed. It's more likely that it had damage. It had sustained damage, but yeah, it was basically that tree had protected it
Whoa.
from being completely wrecked. But I'm sure that they
Oh yeah, okay. Little church that stood survived 9/11. 250 years. Wow.
Actually, this was within a week from right now. There was maybe a mile away from where I am. There's this house that was being used as like a tarot card reader, psychic, new age, all that nonsense. And the upper floor burnt down. And there was construction on the road around it. And so they had turned off all the fire hydrants. So it took the fire department even longer to put it out. So more of it burned. No one was hurt, but I do admit, driving past it post burning, I was like, oh, get that witchcraft out of here. No one was hurt. So that's good.
That's good. Well, they were hurt not by the fire, they were hurt by witchcraft. It just occurred to me it's almost 9:30, or it's going to be soon, and this is now our longest stream.
yeah,
there's
it
still a few
says
people watching, so thank you guys.
I did
Go
find a
ahead.
detail from what we
Oh,
were
go
talking
ahead.
about. It was St. Paul's Chapel where George Washington prayed after taking the oath of office.
Wow.
So, yeah, sorry. I just wanted
That's
to add
cool.
that.
No, that's cool. Yeah, it's now our longest stream, but that's cool. There's a few people still watching, so thank you guys for sticking around the whole time. I'm gonna have to go because it's almost 9:30. But thank you guys for doing this with me. I'm looking forward to next week. I think in the next couple weeks I'm going to have to shift the day, but I'm not sure yet. I know by the 19th I won't be able to do Monday nights anymore. But at some other point before then, I'll figure out a time and keep on doing it. So yeah, that's it.
Cool.
If you guys have any other parting remarks, now's your time.
Jesus is Lord.
Amen.
Based.
Here's a little fun fact to leave you with. So they talk about how the Gospels were written. Oh, the Gospels were written 70 years after Jesus and after the destruction of the temple. Well, Paul died between 64 and 67 AD. And in 1 Timothy 5, he quotes Luke. And Luke is the people that debate between Mark and Matthew, but Luke is usually recognized as the second or maybe even third. So it's just strong evidence that the Gospels were written within 30 years.
Yes.
Of the crucifixion.
Awesome.
So there's a cool
Well,
little nugget.
good place to leave it.
Right.
All right. See
Awesome.
you guys later.
See you guys.